Saint Jose Maria Escriva, known as the Saint of the Ordinary Life, and founder of the organization Opus Dei, once wrote that, "Sanctity is not for a privileged few. The Lord calls all of us. He expects love from all of us, from everyone, wherever they are, from everyone, whatever their state in life, their profession, or job. For the daily life we live, apparently so ordinary, can be a path to sanctity. It is not necessary to abandon one's place in the world in order to search for God, because all the paths of the earth can be the occasion for an encounter with Christ." As I explored our readings this weekend, I noticed the theme of this universal call that I like to explore. In the first reading, the prophet Isaiah beautifully explains how God has called Israel to be a light through which salvation will come to all the nations. In the responsorial psalm, we answer God's call. "Here I am, Lord. I come to do your will." In the second reading, Paul proclaims that he is called to be an apostle by the will of God. And he's writing to the people of Corinth, who, along with anyone who puts their faith in Christ, is also called to be holy. And then in our gospel, John the Baptist testifies that he was called to prepare the way for the Messiah, so that Jesus might be known to the world. One of the themes in the readings is this being called. So what does it mean to be called? Are we all called? And if so, maybe you're thinking, what is my calling? What am I called for? Let's unpack that a little bit. And I think we've all heard that we are called to be holy, that we're called to be saints. That probably isn't new to anybody, but we need to hear it again and again. We need to hear the teachings of the church often so that we can overcome the influence out in the world and keep that solid foundation of faith. So let's answer those questions. Is everyone called, and what are we called for? It's yes. We are all called, and we are called to be holy, to literally become saints. God commands us to be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Paragraph 27 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that the desire for God is written in the human heart because we were created by God and for God. And so God never ceases to call us back to him. He never ceases to call us to seek him, to find full life and happiness in him. And so every baptized person, without exception, is called to holiness. Every lay person, religious sister, brother, priest, deacon, bishop, or pope. We all share the same obligation to live our baptism to the fullest. And one of the most popular phrases of the Second Vatican Council is this universal call to holiness, to be set apart for a divine purpose. And it's a call that touches all of us. It's a call that was at the core of St. Jose Maria's teachings. And at universal holiness, that sounds nice, but what does that mean? What does it look like for us who are trying to pursue holiness in today's world? How can you be expected to live with divine purpose when you have 3 kids, a mortgage, and a golden doodle? Pope Leo announced earlier this month a push to kind of rediscover the wisdom and the grace of the Second Vatican Council, and that comes with rereading some of its documents. So in light of Pope Leo's direction and today's readings, I went back and I reread an apostolic exhortation by Pope Francis, Gaudete et exultate, which is Latin for rejoice and be glad, where Pope Francis builds on this Vatican II theme of the universal call to holiness, and it really helped me to make sense of how normal people like you and me are called to sainthood. So first and foremost, the call to holiness is to be tailored to our own life, our own unique circumstances. And it centers on practical, everyday sanctity. That sainthood can be achieved not just through extraordinary feats, but by doing those ordinary things we do each day with extraordinary love. So it doesn't mean that we have to put on sackcloth and ashes and retreat from the world, but it does mean that we have to strive for holiness in a concrete way. We have to take it serious and don't minimize it. Because sometimes we try to grow our faith in these extreme ways, these ideas we come up with, only to realize that I can't do that. I can't live that extreme lifestyle. It isn't possible for me right now. So then we settle for kind of compromise of mediocre faith. And in the end, the result is that we don't really take holiness serious at all. And we end up following a way of life that is just plain unfulfilling. And I think the mistake is that we tend to think that this holiness is, we have to do something really, really special. It has to be something extraordinary, beyond the normal events of our day, beyond those obligations that everybody else does. But for most of us, the path to holiness is precisely in those ordinary tasks of life. Think of St. Carlo Acutis and his modern life with hobbies like soccer and computer coding and just hanging out with friends, but he had a strong, very strong devotion to the Eucharist. Think of St. Therese of Lisieux, who saw her path as the little way, just by being faithful and charitable in the small duties of her day. There is a hidden path of true holiness by doing things that are never really going to be noticed. They'll never be noticed by anyone, but God will know. Just by being a good person, a good spouse, a good parent, a good child, a good worker, a good friend, a good neighbor, a good Christian, just being a good human being, all done by taking serious those small moments of charity and love that comes with the ordinary course of our day. Now, don't get me wrong, we can be inspired by examples of people who devote themselves to serving others with great fidelity, in extreme cost to their own comfort, but maybe God might have a different path in mind for us. Those saints and those stories we hear, they're definitely helpful, and of course they're inspiring, but maybe they're not meant for us to just copy. That was someone else's path. We have to discern our own path and not try to imitate someone else, but instead focus on the path that God has designed for us in our lives that he put us in. Pope Francis shared a really good example of everyday holiness because it's so simple. And it reads that a woman goes shopping. She meets a neighbor and they begin to speak. And the gossip starts. But she says in her heart, "No, I will not speak badly of anyone." This is a step forward in holiness. Later at home, one of her children wants to talk to her about his hopes and his dreams. And even though she's tired, she sits down and listens with patience and love. That is another sacrifice that brings holiness. Later, she experiences some anxiety, but recalling on the love of the Virgin Mary, she takes her rosary and prays with faith. Yet another path of holiness. Later still, she goes out into the street, encounters a poor person, and stops to say a kind word for him. One more step. This example is of a normal life. It's doable for us. It doesn't ignore the fact that life can present great challenges, that we maybe have to have a great conversion, but most common are those other times where we need only to find a more perfect way of doing the things that we are already doing. Not measuring our holiness by that deed that we are actually doing, but to the extent that Christ is working through us and in us through that action. So that means not getting caught up in the details, not getting sidetracked by missteps, because it's about the entire journey. Nobody is perfect, not all the time. So try to see the entirety of your life as the mission. That's tackled little by little with each decision you make, always trying to grow a little more, to do better with each step. And it's a lifestyle of allowing God to give general direction to your life with a big picture perspective, that our simple lives are part of something greater, part of God's plan for salvation. And that's exciting, that God will choose us and he will use our lives, that he calls to us personally by name to be holy, to be like him. It's a sense of boldness and adventure to leave a mark in the world, to make the world a better place because you were in it doing God's work. It's exciting to realize that we are sent on a mission to do his work with our regular lives. And if you're not quite sure about that and your purpose, you're not really sure what your calling is, just stay open to the possibility that something good is just around the corner. That opportunities will arise if you look for them. Opportunities to be something new, to be greater than you were before. And so this universal call to holiness is meant for all of us, right here and right now, in the middle of our everyday, normal lives. And I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before. None of this is anything new to you, but maybe God is calling us to look at it in a new way. God is eternal newness. He is constantly setting us out on a new path, to pass beyond what is familiar, into those places where we are no longer comfortable. I know she's excited. She's been screaming the whole time, this homily. And I'm excited too, to go to where God's going to stretch us, and he's going to use us to the extent of our gifts that he gave us. Saints are known by their stories. They gave their lives to the Lord in their own unique way, in response to the circumstances of that time. And they didn't ask to be in that position. They didn't expect to find themselves in that situation that they landed in, but their response, they radiated the holiness of God that was dwelling within them. Their response to what was laid before them became the story of their lives, and that was the path to sainthood. Let's rethink our usual way of doing things. Let's open our eyes and our ears, and most of all, our hearts, to the unique path of holiness that God has laid before us. Let's be bold and open to God's call. Let him mess up our life a bit and enjoy the adventure of becoming